Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast where entrepreneurs, founders, and ambitious professionals come to learn from those who have walked the path, navigating challenges and achieving success. Whether it's thriving in business, pivoting, scaling for growth, fundraising, or finding work-life balance, dealing with loneliness, adversity, or overcoming personal struggles. Our guests share the insights and strategies that have empowered them to level up. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Dan De Vries. With 2 decades of experience climbing the corporate ladder, reaching a 6-figure salary at age 27, and an executive role at age 36, Dan has a wealth of knowledge to share. Beyond his impressive career milestones, Dan is passionate about guiding professionals to reach their goals and maintain motivation, well-being, and healthy boundaries in the workplace. In today's episode, we'll uncover practical advice on sustaining motivation through challenges, setting and realizing meaningful career goals, and cultivating a work-life balance that empowers rather than exhausts. Hi, Dan. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, what are the biggest challenges professionals face in maintaining motivation over the long term, and how can they overcome these hurdles?
That is a really good question. Long-term motivation it can be really hard. So the key thing that I like to speak to my students about, and on all of my social channels as well, is motivation is really hard if you're doing something that you don't find fun, interesting, at least some kind of positive feeling about what you're doing. Because if you're doing something to get a result that you want and it's something you hate or something I guess you really don't enjoy, you're going to have to use that grit and push through it and just, determination to get through in the face of doing something not that keen on.
Mm-hmm.
So what I talk about is I try to make sure that people try to find things that really do work for them. It has to be something sustainable, something you can do for the long term. It might sound a little cliche, but it shouldn't feel too much like work. It should feel more like something you want to be doing and that you would be doing within reason. There's always, there's stuff in every job, there's stuff in every role, there's stuff in every situation that is not as fun and that you enjoy less. But overall, I try to aim for that 80% mark. 80% of what you do at work or if you're doing some kind of professional networking needs to be something that you would happily continue doing, and you're motivated to do it because it's something you love, you enjoy. And that's what I find focusing on doing those things makes that long-term sustainability of the motivation far easier. Because if you're going to try and sustain that for 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, doing something you really don't like, you're going to have you need some really strong self-control and some grit if you're going to get through 40 years of doing something you really don't like.
Do you believe in work-life balance?
So I like to use a slightly different terminology for this concept. I like to, yes, so work-life integration is the concept that I like to put forward. And I think that the concept of work-life balance puts work on one side and life on the other. And you're trying to, if you picture the scales, you're trying to balance the two. And for most of us, work is a huge part of our life. We spend hours and hours and hours doing it. It can be a strong source of fulfillment. So I like to talk about it in terms of work-life integration. So integrating what you do for work into your life and making it more of one whole rather than two separate pieces. In terms of the goals or the ideas behind work-life balance and work-life integration, they both achieve the same thing. For me, it's just thinking about it in a different fashion and trying to get past this competition between work and life. So yeah, I think that integrating it into your life just makes it far more sustainable, as we were talking about before, and makes it more achievable to achieve those goals of not getting burnt out, having more job satisfaction, getting that fulfillment from your role,
Mm.
and not feeling like not getting the Sunday scaries or dreading Monday, and really just making it an important part of your life, but not letting it take over your life.
I get that because sometimes I feel like the pressure of having a work-life balance is actually more stressful for me because it's like, well, I can't really separate the two. Why can't I just integrate them? And, why can't I have a business trip and a vacation? Like, why do I have to separate both of them? Like, if I have a work trip, I can take a couple of days and have a vacation out of that, or vice versa. Like, it's just so stressful trying to manage all this separation. And I think, especially for, professionals or even entrepreneurs, it adds to that stress of, I can't take a vacation right now. I can't go home at 6 o'clock, but I can go home at 5 and continue working and being around my children and things like that, right? So I think it's a bit of a fine line in what you can do and integrating that into your lifestyle.
I totally agree. I think the piece you hit there on stress is the critical piece. The whole idea of work-life balance, as it was originally thought of, is to
Mhm.
reduce stress, because stress is what, will have that detrimental impact to us and potentially let us burn out or cause problems in our lives. Um, and so if it's going to add more stress, you're definitely doing it wrong. That's the opposite of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I agree. So, how can professionals set realistic and achievable career goals that align with their personal and professional aspirations?
So this is a multi-part question. It really comes down to finding your own niche, as it were. It's finding what matters to you, what you're good at, what there's demand for in the market, what you're passionate about. There's a whole bunch of things that I work through with my clients to get to a place where we create a decision-making framework about how to make decisions around your career and how it impacts your life. Um, and then ultimately, it comes down to what your personal values are, because those values that you may or may not be aware of about yourself. I certainly wasn't a while ago, before I went through a process of trying to really define what I really valued. Um, it's quite a eye-opening experience if you've never done it before. Um, yeah, so aligning the values, the passions, there needs to be demand for what you do. If you happen to be, my favorite example is, passionate about underwater basket weaving, there's probably no real demand for that. If you love it, great, but you're probably not going to be able to make a decent living out of that. And we all want to build a lifestyle. It's about building a lifestyle or a life that we enjoy and that we get a sense of satisfaction from.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of the key areas that I like to bring all together to get to that point where you're creating that career and the life that go together, integrated, as we just spoke about, to make it more interesting and, I guess, more fulfilling.
Can employers do anything to help that process?
Of course, employers can always do more. Employees can always do more too,
Mhm.
but employers can support what the employees need. Now, I don't really like to pit employers versus employees, because there's too much of that. Kind of like the work-life balance thing. There's too much of that. It's a competition. It's us versus them mindset, and I think that is actually detrimental to achieving positive outcomes for both employer and employee. But there has been a historical, I guess, prevalence of employers abusing their power, I guess, as it were. There's a power indifference typically
Yeah.
between an employer and an employee. So with that said, employers can do things around supporting flexible working, supporting, I think one of the most important things, at least for me and the clients that I have, is talking to their employees about their career progression. What does the future hold? What does it look like? What do they care about? What matters to them? Why do they want to do what they want to do? And talk about growing that career, talk about what are the next steps, because as people, as humans, we need to see a positive future. That's what can be for most of us extremely motivating, and it can help us really perform at our best. And it also helps reduce that stress when you know, hey, in say 3 years, here are the milestones I need to hit to be considered for, say, this next role, or this step up in responsibility, or this next interesting step into my career at my current workplace. It gets a little bit different when you're talking about career progression that moves outside of your current workplace, of course, because there's some tension there between the employer and the employee. But generally speaking, it's about seeing that positive future and being able to believe that it is possible, and that it's realistic that we are going to achieve it. And those employers that really focus on career development for their staff, they definitely see, in my experience, high levels of performance and engagement from their workforce.
Do you think that that helps reduce the retention for a company? Because there's so many different statistics out there. You never know which one to believe. But people say that you want to make more money, change career, not careers, change jobs often. Every
Mm-hmm.
2 years. But then again, like if you stay at a company for more than 2, 3, 4, 5 years, there's benefits to that too. Do you find that if a company works with their employees just to reduce that stress and set goals, it'll keep them at that company longer?
Absolutely, yes. And I've not worked in a role or at a business where staff retention has not been a major focus. And I've
Mm,
also not worked anywhere where they've really done a good job
yeah,
of actually retaining the staff. It seems to be a devilishly difficult problem,
yeah.
because there's always the tension between financial tension with the business and staff retention. And on that front, it's so much easier to measure retention and measure um, the values of how many people, your churn, your staff turnover. But it's really hard to measure the cost of losing a key staff member. You can do it, but
Hmm.
the cost of measuring it is high. And then and therefore, because it's so difficult to do, and so it's hard to know, but it's really easier to measure how much it costs to hire a new staff member, or
Yeah.
their salary difference between the old staff member and the new staff member. Um, so I think, yeah, the retention piece is an important one. But going back to what you said about, the advice, I guess, the generic advice out there, the first thing I would always say is that generic advice is generic, and it doesn't necessarily apply to you
Mm,
or to me. But generally speaking, my rule of thumb is that if you want to take a step up in responsibility, you're much better off staying in the workplace that you're at right now, because you're a known quantity.
mm,
The likelihood of you being, especially if you're a high performer and you've got great potential, if that's known about you, you are on their radar about the potential. When there's opportunities, you are more likely to be someone that they will talk to about taking that increased responsibility, and and which is progression in your career.
mhm.
But if you just want to make more money, you are usually better off playing businesses against other businesses and finding the one that will pay you the most money. Now, that won't necessarily lead you to job satisfaction,
Yeah.
but if you're just chasing the money, then hey, if that's your goal and freely admit that, then oftentimes the budgets that businesses have for new hires far exceeds budgets for retention.
Yeah. How can professionals establish and maintain healthy boundaries at work, and why is it crucial for long-term career success?
So the established part of boundaries is the most important part. So establish those boundaries day one, early, 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 early. So the psychology behind this is I find interesting. Um, when you firmly establish your boundaries and you establish them early,
Hmm.
and let's say you haven't done this before and you're moving into a new role, and you early on you say, I I did this myself, Thursdays and Fridays, I cannot come to the office. I have, I have to pick my daughter up from school. I've got other obligations to do with, school drop off and pick up and things like that. And at the start, that was it. And every Thursday and Friday, not in the office. I'm online from home and I'm doing work. Um, and people respect it when you are firm. You kind of go into it with this, oh, I hope I'm not upsetting anyone by making these firm boundaries, and you feel a little bit, I guess, cagey about it. But if I found, and a lot of the people that I've worked with have found that if you set those boundaries really early, clearly, and honestly, they're not, and if they're not unreasonable boundaries,
Yeah.
people immediately respect them. Like you would get, hey, can we do this on Thursday? Oh, no, sorry, I forgot. You don't work from the office Thursdays. That's cool. Let's schedule it for Monday. There's no,
Yeah.
you need to be here on Thursday and we're doing this. It's just it just works in a respectful way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the tip number one, is setting that boundary early, because if you, setting it, sticking to it, being firm to it, and setting it early. If you then waver a little bit and go like, oh, actually, I could probably come in on Thursday afternoon if you really needed me. People don't consciously take advantage of that necessarily.
Mm.
Maybe some do, but oftentimes people will unconsciously take advantage of that. They go, oh, actually, Dan's flexible. Let's just do it on Thursday. He'll come in. And what it's doing is, that is, I guess it's setting an expectation, and it's
Yeah.
setting yourself up to be people not respect your boundaries because you're not respecting your own boundaries. And once you start doing something regularly, guess what? That's your new boundary. And that's what people are going to assume is the case. And then when you pull back, when you pull back and
Mm.
say, well, no, actually, I don't work from the office Thursdays. They go, what do you mean? You've been doing that for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Why the change now? And it actually, it puts you in a place where you then, when you reinforce your boundaries, people get upset with you, and you annoy them.
I find that really interesting, and I kind of like that. I think people never really think about, I'm gonna set boundaries at work. People are like, I'm setting boundaries with my family and I'm setting boundaries with my friends. Like, I need boundaries in my life. But when it comes to work, it usually, there's this pressure of the boss and this is
Always.
my job. And it's like, ooh, am I allowed to set boundaries? Like, I just feel like people don't
Yeah.
even know that they can.
Yeah, there's definitely that. All of us have that feeling, in my experience. The way
Yeah.
like, oh, can I do this? Like, this
Mm.
guy's paying me to be there. Like, can I? I don't know. Is this right? But and that hesitation can lead you to not do it, which means you end up not having the boundaries, and you end up potentially burning out, or doing things that just don't work for you, and then you end up getting upset or disengaged, and you end up going somewhere else to work, and it's a lose-lose kind of situation.
Yeah, because if you need to pick up your kid on Thursday and you haven't set that boundary, you're now going to go look for a job that will allow you to do that.
Yep, exactly. So setting those boundaries, yeah, early is the critical part. So the psychology around this, as I was saying before, is the really interesting part to me. I did a little bit of study about this quite a while ago, but the same thing happens with, say, if you're a business or an entrepreneur, customer interactions. You set those expectations. If you do something consistently, it becomes the expectation and the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do it, and if you've got employees and you say you pay them a bonus and it's not expected, that's called a delighter. And people go, oh, this is amazing, right? And they go, I feel really good. And you get a short-term sugar hit of motivation, morale, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If it was unexpected, if it's not written into their contract, if it's written into the contract that you will receive a bonus of 10% of your salary if you hit these targets, people like it, but they expect it. And if it's an expectation, what happens is that an expectation that is met leads to basic satisfaction. I expect it. It happened. Great. Let's move on. Let's keep going. It doesn't make me go, I want to serve you better or jump over the moon for you. But what happens is if it's an expectation and you don't meet it, that will piss people off. And
Yeah.
that will make them look elsewhere and go, well, I'm not getting what I expected. Like it upsets people, and that demotivates them and is going to increase staff turnover. It's going to disengage your staff. And the same thing happens with customers. It's the same deal.
Yeah. I get it. You're making me think about a couple things I need to change. But I love that idea of like it being a surprise, like
Mhm.
a good surprise, not an expectation.
And the next piece to that is if you give that good surprise
Yeah.
regularly, it's not a surprise anymore.
Well, it becomes an
Do
expectation.
it correct. And now what you've done is set yourself up for when you stop doing that surprise, you are going to annoy people and
Oh,
you're going to disengage them. So it needs to be, you have to manage that.
how do you win? I feel like I can't win with that.
You got to be infrequent enough for
Mm,
it to be unexpected, basically. Unexpected, like higher level positivity
mhm.
will breed that purpose of people going above and beyond and doing stuff because they expect. I mean, that's if you're just talking about financial gain.
Yeah.
Also, obviously, you can treat people with respect and do all the positive things, or you could give someone a benefit of saying, "Hey, just take the day off.
Yeah.
It's Friday. We don't have anything on." Like that's another really cool thing you could do as a motivator to help people feel good about what they do and feel respected and really wanted to be
Mm,
there and keen to support the business at a better level. So you can win, but you just if you do it, it's about the frequency. And once it becomes an expectation,
yeah.
then you set yourself up for if you're going to do it regularly, just make it the norm and make it the norm. And if you do happen to not be able to do it, then you need to manage that expectation. But if it's going to be the norm and you think, oh, I gave this person more money every month because they hit their targets, it's no longer a bonus, it's an expectation. And that expectation has the opportunity to be not met, which will disengage.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So, how can individuals balance their ambition and career drive with the need to take care of their mental and physical health?
This is different for everyone.
Mhm.
Um, Typically, I'm working with people that are quite ambitious and motivated. Um, and those people have a tendency to overdo it, myself historically included, um, and focusing so hard on the next milestone or so hard on the next target that everything else kind of fades into the background.
Mm,
So for people that are that way inclined, it's really about focusing on the signs because if you're anything like me and you have the ability to laser focus on things if you really need to, what that basically means is you're cutting out all the noise and you're not listening to anything else. And it's a great skill to have if you have a deadline or something is due, but it comes at a cost of everything else in your life at that point in time.
yeah.
And that's okay if you don't do that all the time. But if you get into the rhythm of, well, what's my next milestone? Like I hit this milestone. Awesome. Right. Love that. Tick that
Yeah.
box. What's next? Next milestone. Let's go. And all of the everything else falls apart around you. You won't notice.
Mm,
So look for the excuse me, look for the warning signs in yourself. So for me, I would get raging headaches at the end of a workday.
oh, wow.
And I don't get headaches typically. Like it's not a typical like thing that I get. But if I had a stressful day, I may not have noticed it was stressful because I was so focused on the task at hand.
Mm,
But at the end of the day, when I stopped, your body goes, okay, a little bit of rest. Let's hit you with this. And it took me a while to realize that that was stress-induced physical symptoms,
mm,
rather than just like, oh, something's not right. I've got a headache. Oh, okay, I'll take some paracetamol. I'll drink some water. I'll sit down and rest for a while, and I'll be fine.
mhm.
But if you get that consistently, look for those symptoms. It might not be that for you. You might get a sore throat, or you might it could be you might feel like not socializing at all. Whatever the symptoms are for you, finding them and recognizing them and writing them down somewhere. Have a note to say like, hey, if I see this, remind yourself that if I see this thing, that's a cue to just re-look at what's going on at the moment and go like, okay, this is a sign. Let's have a look at it. What's going on right now? A bit of a self-review and go, am I doing too much? Or is this just a temporary thing? And so finding those things in yourself, and because we're all different,
Yeah.
we each have a different tell, I guess, if you will, that something's not quite right. Um, Figure that out over time. It takes time, and keep a strong mental presence about seeing it come up. And if it comes up regularly, then you're like, it's time to review something.
Mm. What happens if someone's not very self-aware?
Well, then it's hard to do anything really. Look, I've been there myself.
Yeah.
It takes some practice and some real diligence to learn self awareness and learn about yourself. You can rely on other people. You can. I'm a huge fan of working with other people in every regard. Find a friend or a work friend, or maybe a parent or a child or someone, or a colleague that's you can say, hey, can you just, do me a favor? Here's what I'm going to do. I think I have this tendency to overdo things. Can you just, look for this in me? If I keep doing this or I keep doing that or something's going on that doesn't seem right, I want you to approach me. I'm not going to get offended that you say, hey, Dan, you're being a bit of a
Mm-hmm.
pain recently. Um, Use the people around you, someone you trust, of course, to help you manage that. And that over time, they'll potentially point things out because it's easier to see things from a third party perspective than it is in ourselves, oftentimes. Um, so, yeah, get someone you trust to really look at what you're doing
Yeah.
and look for those signs and then share them with you.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up, one last question. How important are support systems in sustaining motivation and achieving career goals? And how can professionals build and leverage these networks? Which sort of goes to what we were just talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of related.
Mhm.
So I truly believe, and I would argue with anyone who disagrees with me vehemently, um, that we never achieve anything by ourselves ever. Everything we do involves at least one other person, usually a whole lot of other people in some, even in some background way. For instance, like even the most basic thing, I got up and I had breakfast this morning. Do you know how many people were involved just to allow the food to be in your house and the electricity to be running your refrigerator and the all of those things, right?
Yeah.
So we live in a society that everyone does, whether you live in the United States or whether you live in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
Everyone has to work together to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And so, yeah, the support systems are absolutely critical because if you think you're a lone wolf and you're going to go it alone, you won't go as far and you won't go as fast. We are social creatures at the end of the day, and we need each other. And biologically and evolutionarily, we need each other to survive and to thrive. And so, creating support networks, whether it is friends and family or professional support networks, both of them are extremely valuable for advancing your career. Typically, your professional network is more valuable in terms of opportunities, but for managing your work-life balance and stress, potentially your friends and family are more important in terms of your support network.
Yeah.
So making sure that you, I guess, treat the development of those networks as not a box ticking exercise, not I need to network with 10 people in my industry, tick, tick, tick. Okay, done. What's next? It's not a task, it's about people. And those people are humans with hopes and dreams and feelings, and they've got families too, and all of those things that make us, it's a focus on the relationship. And so those relationships are the core of those networks that make them support networks because they will support you. And that relationship piece that's what's really going to make them last long term, and it's going to make them sustainable, and it's going to make them valuable. And when you're thinking about that too, be the support network for someone else. Don't just be the person who needs support. Be the giver, because the giver is the person who receives.
Love it. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a very enlightening conversation. For anyone who wants to reach out and find you, can you share all of your information?
Yeah, sure. So my favorite social hangout is LinkedIn, which you may have guessed. I'm a bit of a tragic on LinkedIn. But at dandevries.com, if you want to chat with me, I offer free consultations to anyone in the entire world who wants one. And so my younger audience typically finds me on TikTok, which is DDV_coaching. And those are my three primary channels. I'm on everything really, but those are the ones that I focus on. I find TikTok heaps of fun. And I love the LinkedIn community. The community part of LinkedIn is really strong.
Awesome. And I'll put all of that stuff in the links in the bio. So you'll be able to find it there. Well, Dan, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your knowledge with us.
Thanks, Sonia. I appreciate you inviting me on to be here.
Yeah, no problem. I want to thank Dan for joining me today and sharing practical strategies for sustaining motivation to actionable advice on setting boundaries and prioritizing well being. This episode is filled with many valuable takeaways. Remember, success isn't just about climbing the ladder, it's about doing so in a way that aligns with your values and leaves you feeling fulfilled. And that's a wrap. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of learning, growth, and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and connect with our community on social media. I'd love to hear your feedback, so leave a review and let me know what topics you'd want to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace challenges, adapt with tenacity, and keep pushing forward. Keep growing, keep pivoting, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more insightful conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.